Hello. In this video we're going to discuss some of the decisions we had made about choosing the right location for our pole barn before we had the building built. And then I'm going to discuss with you a couple of things now that we've had this building up for 20 years that I may have done differently. There's a lot to consider when you're putting your building up in relationship to your home, or if it's going to be the first building you have installed on your property. Utilities is a must. You have to know where your electric's going to be, should you have buried phone lines, things like that. So the first thing I would suggest is figuring out exactly what you want to do with your utilities. Now, that being said, we actually had that done. I met with the engineers. They come out with the electric company, and we had discussed bringing the power in from this end of the property. Well, I was at work the day that they come out here to install the power lines, and they chose to come up the driveway instead. Now, we had already had the property cleared, and I knew exactly where I was going to be putting the pole barn. That was part of the original building plan. So when I got here, and not that it's a bad thing, but I'm just telling you things can change, and right over to the right of you there, that's where the main power line pole ended up being. And you can see, I mean, the power lines themselves ended up rather close to the building there. That would not have been exactly where I wanted it, but after the fact, we already had this thing leveled off, the driveway cut in, and I wanted to keep my door close to the driveway instead of having to build another road to move the building down. And also, if we would have done that, we would have had to cut these trees out, this over here behind me, and those provide a lot of shade for the yard and part of the landscape. So we went ahead and stood the building up where we had chose to. As far as the power goes, it actually did work out into our benefit. This is a 30 by 50 building that you're looking at, and then down on the end where the white door is there, that's actually an add-on that we done. That's a one-bedroom apartment on the end of the building there. So it ended up being almost 70 feet long. As you're planning for your building, one thing I would say is plan for add-ons and utilities and anything you can think of that you may possibly want to add to your building later on. Because the first thing we experienced, and I'm sure it's the same way for a lot of you, once they came in and built the building for us and we slid that door open for the first time and seen how absolutely wide open that building was, our plans changed for what we wanted the barn for immediately. So it went from being a place that we could park our equipment and different things like that to we're going to finish this, put a bathroom in it, and use this as family room, and that's what we've done. So the barn is 100% finished inside, and again, I think the boat's been parked in there probably 3 or 4 times, and other than that, there's never been anything wheeled inside that building, because you're going to love it. As soon as they stand it up and you see that wide open space, your plans may change pretty quick, okay? Another thing to keep in mind is planning for water. Our well is sitting up here on the other side of the house, and we just simply trenched in a line. And because it was under the driveway, I went ahead and put that thing down about 4 foot deep. We ran off the well straight over here to the corner. You can probably see the spigot there. And so that was the termination for the water outside. And then we trenched in a line and put water into the building. That way we had a finished bathroom inside. So planning for your utilities is a must. Have an absolute plan as to how you want your building to come together. Again, from the electric pole to the entrance of your building, your driveway, and then another really important thing to mention is grade. Now, I lifted this building up about 34 inches off of grade, so that put me on the low side up here at the driveway. I was about 14 inches off the ground. Well, again, now you're looking at 20 years of living here, so I've added to this driveway. We've put rock in here probably 10 times over the past 20 years, and now the driveway has become about 1 foot taller than it used to be. Well, I'm starting to get into drainage problem, because now the driveway being higher, we're starting to run water down to the side of the building and off, and then coming around the upper side of the driveway there. I'll show you that here in a minute. So when you're planning for your grade, again, now if you're perfectly flat outside, that's not going to matter. But if you have any type of slope running towards your building, allow a little bit extra if your driveway is going to be as close as it is as what you see behind you here. Because like I said, I didn't even think about adding rock to the driveway and lifting the grade up. So I've created a water problem, okay? So something to keep in mind. Now here you can see, and again, we've lifted this driveway up now at least 12 inches over the past handful of years. And you can see down here, we're starting to get water storing in next to the building. And again, when we originally started, that was about a foot higher than where it is currently sitting now. But everything's starting to wash down in towards it, simply because we've had to add rock to the driveway. So that's something to consider when you're getting your building stood up. Kind of look down the road and see if there's going to be an advantage of either making the building a little farther off the ground or not. Your building setting up 18 inches off the current grade is not going to be a bad thing for you. Now on the other side of that, you do have to keep it to where it's accessible for you to get, pulled into the barn as far as where your door and your finished floor is going to be. There's a lot to it. A lot of thought goes into the planning of it, and if you do your homework, you're going to enjoy your building more. There's nothing worse than trying to back a trailer in or pull anything into a building that you've got to climb up over 6 or 8 inches of grade to jump your vehicle up into. So that gets tricky as well. So there's a fine line there as far as being able to keep the water away from the building, but yet keep enough grade to where you can pull something in and out of there should you choose to. But I did attempt to keep the barn square with the home, so everything has a nice running line up through here as you're pulling up the driveway, and it does look nice in the springtime. Now, as far as tree removal, you can see I've kept these back. I'll move out of your way here. Just to the left of the screen there, I've kept those back to what I would thought would have been more than enough to keep from branches and things like that falling down, and we have. I did not plan for adding on to the end of the building there. So when we added on that extra 20 feet down there, that pushed me in closer to the trees that you see at the far right-hand corner of the building there. So that is something that, that's going to become an issue probably in the next 10 years or so, because we do have some limbs now directly over the barn, and that's never a good thing. So if you have the opportunity as you're planning for your building, if you have any kind of tree removal, you may keep that in mind. Again, 20 years now, and the limbs has grown considerably larger than what they were when it started. So again, now they're over the barn on that particular end, but we did add 20 feet to it. So keep that in mind. Now here on the back of the barn, I was telling you about utilities. We do have a septic tank that is 40 feet off the back of the building here. And so that's another thing to plan for. Again, as you're plumbing, as you're standing your building up, have a pretty good idea that where it's going to need to go, and be it if you're hooking into city water and sewer, or if you're running a drain field that we have here, like we have here, just have an idea as to where you would run that drain field. It's a lot easier to do all this planning before you have your building up than once you start the process and then realize, that maybe that's not exactly where you needed it to be. Okay? Now another thing I wish I would have done, and again, I built this into the building so entirely on me, but you can see my grade here is now starting to sink down, and I'm going to have to add some more dirt to it. And I can do that after the fact. That's not no big deal. But what I should have done before we actually started standing this up is went ahead and brought my grade out about 4 feet away from the building. By getting it out here around 4 feet, by the time everything drains off the building and all this dirt compacts itself, it's going to give you a better situation as far as mowing around the building, taking care of it, and also you won't see these air gaps. So I've already started the sealing process and getting everything sealed in there. The weather's been a little bit cold, but I am going to have to add some dirt to the back side of the grate here. And again, off of this back corner here, we're lifted up about 34 inches. If you're going to have, if your yard is flatter or ground is flatter, you may not have that problem. But if you're having to lift your building up to get everything flat and square, that's something to keep in mind. Another thing to mention now, once your contractor comes in and starts standing your building up, it goes quicker than what you think it does. By the time they drop the lumber off and they put this building together for me, 2.5 days later, they were walking out of here and this building was complete. So once the building process starts, you don't have a whole lot of time to change your mind. Those boys are pretty quick, okay? And I will mention, by the way, when we had our building stood up, I did price this material. I am capable of building one of these. I priced the material, and for me to purchase it locally and build the building myself was $2,000 higher with no labor on my part as far as figured into the price. It was $2,000 higher for me to buy the material and build the building than it was to have them come in and actually stand it up for me. So that's something to consider. I mean, everything changes, and again, you're looking at something that's 20 years old. So do your homework, call over there and tell, you know, the big lumber yards now, Lowe's, Menards, places like that, they can tell you. You'll tell them what size building you want, and they can figure it right down to the nail for you as to what it's going to cost you. Then you have to figure out what your labor is and things like that. Compare that with several of the builders in your area and see where you're at. You know, it'll give you a good idea as to what this would actually cost you. And another thing to keep in mind too, if you're going to be using these for commercial buildings, is getting larger trucks and things like that turned in and around. So that may play a factor in your choices to where you're going to have your building installed as well. You know, parking is always something. And it almost seems like you never have enough, right? After you get your building stood up and you slide that door open for the first time, you know, you're going to understand that you have a lot of space to work with. So I hope this video has been helpful for you in some way. Take your time, you're going to get there, and you're going to enjoy your building. I want to thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.